we have the online ability to connect. Let's call the meeting to order.
Okay, so we have two articles that were amended at deliberative session, and those two articles are 24, which is the Barrington Commons Town Center Tax Increment Financing District, and 44, which is the Joint Advisory Budget Committee. 24 changed only to add additional details, which can be found at the beginning of the article, where it explains that the plan is to buy the 13-acre lot using tax increment financing, and then includes a tax impact statement, which explains that no, your taxes will not go up, but new taxes that would have helped your tax rate will be set aside for a period of 8 years. And so those were a series of 3 amendments that happened at deliberative session, and this is the result. And we just need to update our recommendation vote based on the new language. So start with a recommendation for approval and then vote. Roll call.
Recommendation for approval. Second.
Okay. Take a vote.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
No. This sucks. I lost a vote on the library and now on the TIF district.
We'll talk about that after the meeting's over.
Michael?
Michael can vote.
He voted and he voted yes.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry, Michael.
Okay, Joint Advisory Budget Committee, and it sounded like we might have a short discussion on this. The change that happened at deliberative session was increasing the membership from 5, which was what was petitioned, to 7. Substantially, it's the same otherwise.
So is there a tax impact that we vote on this?
Okay, so I contemplate this in my email. So the school budget committee recorded a recommendation vote on the petitioned version that's going to be on the school ballot. So this article on the school ballot will say not recommended by the school board, not recommended by the budget committee. On Monday, I'm going to ask the select board if, for consistency's sake, they want the budget committee, our budget committee, to weigh in on the article or not. In advance of that, since we're here, I wanted to record that vote, then verify with the select board. The select board didn't want it previously, but now we know that the school included on theirs, and it is kind of topical to the budget committee, so maybe it would be beneficial for residents to know. I just don't want them to be confused. Why is the school budget committee recommending, whatever.
Okay. So you have 2 warrant articles that say the same thing on
Yes.
2 different things? How does that work if one votes yes, one votes no?
They're advisory anyway, so it doesn't really matter. For things that it matters, it wouldn't happen unless it was approved on both warrants.
It's going to be funny when you see the vote totals are going to be completely different.
Won't that be funny?
Thing.
Yeah. It actually might be kind of interesting because that might tell us how many people go in and either just vote on school or just vote on town. Because those numbers would might be advised by that. Okay, discussion. Michael, did you have a question or a conversation point about the committee? You thought it was too.
Yeah, I think I went and I emailed you about it, and I was thinking that the total number, I don't know how many members are on the school budget committee. I've heard 3 and I've heard 5, so I'm assuming it's one of those 2.
There's 5 seats, but only 3 current members, is my understanding.
Oh, okay, so they're short 2 members right now. Yeah, if you're going and you're going from 5 on the municipal side and then 5 on the school side down to 7, you're getting less numbers of people involved in this process and I think that's going in the wrong direction. That was my first objection. The second one was I'm thinking that rather than going and having them involved as a single budget committee all the way through, that they have separate budget committees for the initial process for both the municipal and the school. And then once those are resolved, come together and talk about the overall budget for the town.
Right. So unfortunately, we don't obviously have the ability to adjust what the proposal is now. So I guess the question before the committee is, do you like this or do you like what we do now? Because it's unlikely that something different would happen, even if it's a good idea and even if people like that idea better. And so I think the recommendation is, do we recommend having a joint committee that has 7 members, or the default, which is the status quo, which is we continue having 1 and 1?
I have a question. Is this budget committee following the definition of a budget committee as in the RSA's in
No.
the state?
Still advisory.
It's still an advisory.
Correct. And that would be a way, to that point, that would be a way to make this happen by statute if it were a municipal budget act, subject to the municipal budget act, and they would have to pass on both. And that would be one budget committee, like what Phil Irving did in Rollinsford.
I agree with Mike in that going from 10 down to 7. And my thought was, I like it. I think there should be joint involvement to see what the other side's doing. But if this is what we have now, let's start with 7. If it turns out to be overwhelming, then we can expand and maybe go up to 9 if it turns out. But I'd like to see something like this start, because I think it's important to be able to see what's going on. From my vantage point here, that's what, 28 million is a school budget?
29.
That's a big chunk of change. And it's just be easier for us to get a better handle on what is going on with the town finances, if that's our mission, to know what's going on over with them.
I would point out too, that the alternates, assuming the alternates function, even though they don't vote, now we're down to 9, so as opposed to 10.
Okay.
I think we need to do it. I just think as it's currently proposed, it's got disaster written all over it. Like, you're just gonna all of a sudden say, these 2 groups come together one, and we know there's already like a distinction between the 2. Like, I would support this if we had a charter in place to say, this is what the role, the functions are gonna be, a plan moving forward. Because this is just gonna be a pissing match between 2 sides. Well, obviously the school doesn't want us. We want to be part of it, but if we go in with already butting heads, and I think this would be better served with next year voting on this, but prior to that, coming up with the current budget committees and coming up with like basically a charter that says, this is going to be the function, this is how we're going to roll it out, this is what we're going to review. Are we going to review, is the joint going to review everything in step with them, or just at the end everybody gets together? I just think there's no path forward. And it makes like it's going to be 6-hour meetings with 10 people there.
Well, given that they've said no, I think it's all academic, but I also think it might be useful for the 2, for the new budget committee to get together and try to hash this out themselves and really ask what is the important part. It's part of starting to learn how to function as a joint group, in my view.
It took this committee some time to kind of sort out.
Oh, yeah.
From the time I first joined to today, this committee's involvement, I think you've seen that.
You summarized it well.
More than anyone. It took time to work this out. And the only way it worked out is to see how it worked. I mean, we had to do it one way and wanted to push in other places. So I think that this could work this way.
I think it could work. I just think you need a plan ahead of time.
Let's assume that, and I don't know if this is a fair assumption or not, but let's assume residents overwhelmingly support the articles on both sides, saying, yeah, no duh, like that,
Right.
That should happen. I think that sends a very strong message that people on both sides need to check their egos and get rid of this 2 sides and butting heads and sit down and figure it out. And there's going to be a lot of things process-wise that need to be resolved first in order to be effective. But I think if we owe it to the residents, assuming it's overwhelmingly supported, we owe it to the residents to be adults and sit down, go through a process, and move past any of the contention and, hey, we liked the idea, we supported it, we didn't like the idea. If residents tell us to do it, we need to do it. We need to do it professionally. We need to do it as adults. And so I'm maybe more optimistic, and I've been down this road, right? It was 2.5 years with the shared services agreement trying to get something solidified on shared services, let alone a joint budget committee. But there was no referendum from residents saying, we want you to do this. It is important for us that you do this. And that's what I see this being. And I think it's going to be difficult for anybody to sit in a room if residents overwhelmingly support this and stand in the way of it. So I'm more optimistic than you, I think.
The other thing that I think is kind of important that we don't want in this community is who proposed this. Who's the person who proposed it? That particular individual has a lot of say.
Political capital.
Thank you. That's what I'm looking for. Rick Walker has lots of credibility here. And I don't think that's a small thing.
And to be on the school board, perhaps.
That would be definitely good.
There's a 66% chance, right?
Right.
But Peter's not here, so we can't know for sure. Okay, probably ready to take a vote?
I would say no.
Somebody ready to make a recommendation? Motion?
I would make a motion that we accept as written.
Recommend it in a second?
Second,
Okay, vote.
Yes.
yes.
No.
No.
Okay. So that may or may not be on the warrant. We'll ask the select board on Monday.
Well, it goes against them, so against the stand, so probably not.
I was thinking that I wouldn't tell them.
What am I supposed
But
to
do we
say?
need to put in why? Every time there's been disagreement.
Yep.
We put in a reason.
Why?
And I don't think people are saying they don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think that there's something more important that would be the distinction we should raise.
And John, I agree with you that it needs to be fleshed out, but I see this as a starting point that if we can get this, then we can flesh it out
But
later.
the fact
So-
that it does away with each committee on the side, if it's one, means that what we've accomplished could just go away. And that bothers me, because that committee is now going to take a rubber stamp and everything he said, because that's what they're used to doing with the school. And so anything he wants to come in and propose, that new committee, what are they going to do about it?
But we also may be able to bring our higher level of introspection and examination of the
I
budget
agree totally with that.
to that side.
I
So
agree totally with that. The reservation that I have is that, do we have that kind of time to just stretch things out? And so that really is my big concern. The people coming from it, not coming from it from a perspective of fiscal accountability. They're coming from it from a perspective of the administration is correct. What they've done, we have to kind of go along with. We only meet twice a year. And they're not used to the discipline and the standing, putting the effort in. It does require if you do a good job. And I'm just concerned that this proposal as structured has too much risk in it. I'd rather see an approach that says, and have the board say, have the budget committees meet and come up with a process which can combine and have a general thing, and then maybe come up with this as a result of the deliberation between the two committees, the two advisory committees. So that's why I
And
vote.
I'm hearing consensus in the dissenting opinion about that the committee should design what it looks like and design a process and then let residents weigh in.
I would suggest, that's not just counter your argument, is that this says that we ought to do this. And that puts the onus, I think, on the appointing boards, the select board and the school board. And I think what that first forces us to do is for the select board and the school board to get together and kind of give the direction to this. I think this is kind of a
Don't
general.
read that into this, because don't read that it's already established. And then the committee establishes an advisory committee. Yeah, it puts an onus, that's what should happen. The boards get together and say, how would we want to structure this so it's fair to both sides?
Yeah.
That is a board level decision. This is not a board. vote.
Not speaking for Rick, but I think, part of Rick's approach on this was that he kind of knew that this article had to be a couple of steps down the path in order to really facilitate that happening. Because if the article were to encourage the select board and school board to get together and consider the design for a joint advisory budget committee, and then maybe get the budget committees together, that I feel like Rick's concern is that wasn't far enough down the path to really let voters send a message that this is important to them. And so I know it doesn't say that, hey, if this happens, then the school board and select board should get down and figure out exactly how it's going to go and get the budget committees together. But we'll just have to wait and see. But we've taken our vote, so we'll and I don't think I've written my materials for Monday's meeting just objectively asking, do you think they should have an opinion? The only one sitting at the table that will know confidently what that decision is Dannon. But I wasn't planning to tell them that because I don't think their decision should be based on it, which dovetails into something that we'll talk about.
That's assuming Dannon doesn't spread the word.
Well, I have to, if he gives me the order.
I'd like to make a motion to go into non-public for the advisory budget committee to make a recommendation on the joint advisory budget committee.
I think we need to lower the cone of silence.
Okay.
I won't.
Any other business properly to come before the advisory budget committee?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Although if they pay attention, if the rest of the select board looks in on this, which they're entitled to do.
They'll know.
I won't say anything.
Feel better.
Yeah,
Yeah, I hope you feel better, Mike.
Can I say,